So there was this incredibly handsome young gentleman named Face. Face was putting together this really progressive A-team of sorts of progressive educators, right? And Face connected with Bob right away. He was like, and Bob's got the pedigree, right? He's got the chops. He's been in education for so long. And Face and Bob then decided, we need someone else to help continue to round out this team, right? Someone perhaps with a clear focus on equity, someone maybe with a tougher exterior, but a gentle heart. So they invited me onto the team. Face and Bob insisted that I always wear a shirt, so trust me, I'm doing everyone a favor right now. I'm rock a shirt, but there is a gold chain in here somewhere. And then simultaneously, I think Bob and I was like, okay, we've got one more space for one more person. We need someone that wears a hat like all the time, like always has a hat on. Who's that person, y'all? That's right, Al. So Al joined the A-team. So that's our A-team. That's how Bob and I met. Really, not really. No, but in all seriousness, thank you, Bob, for those incredibly generous words. Very moved by them. And thank you, Al, and the entire BIE organization for this honor. I was telling Bob earlier, it doesn't get old, right? This is the work. And it's truly an honor to receive this award. And it's a great reminder to me of how privileged and honored I've been, and how lucky and fortunate I've been to work alongside some incredible educators and leaders committed to young people from all walks of life, but especially those that are most grossly underserved in this country, specifically our students growing up in poverty, our students of color, immigrant youth who are English language learners, students with disabilities, and students that are consistently dealing with trauma. I'd be remiss if I did not acknowledge that I'm sure that everyone here is working with some population of those students. So with that, I thank you all also for the work that you do day in and day out for your young people. And always want to make sure that I acknowledge the Big Picture Learning co-founders, because I didn't create this. This is something that I feel like I and my colleague Andrew Frischman are standing on the shoulders of giants, Elliot Washer and Dennis Lickey, for their vision and for consistently having the courage to bang on the system in the name of what's in the best interest for young people at all times. So I wanted to just recognize them. And please know that I accept this award not necessarily as a recognition of anything that I've accomplished, but hopefully as an example of how hard my colleagues and I work day in and day out for young people, because that's what it's about day in and day out. We want to ensure that we're having a significant impact on the lives of children. So I wanted to share a little bit around Big Picture Learning. So Big Picture started 20 years ago with the founding of our first school, the Met School in Providence, Rhode Island. If you look at the map and look really closely, it's the one highlighted in green. It's hard to miss. And it was founded with this notion that we wanted to develop a school where students were known extremely well. We knew students, we know the entire student. And that students were then able to engage in relevant real-world learning experiences in their communities that allowed them to continue to flourish, and then develop projects that allowed them to do so. Proudly, it's an idea that has caught on. We're currently in 23 states, have 60 schools across the states, and then we also have 13 schools internationally. The great thing is that as much as we would love to be able to say we're in every single state, we don't have to be. Because of great collaborations with organizations like the New Tech Network, Expeditionary Learning, International Network for Public Schools, High Tech High, BIE, and many others. For us, we feel collectively we're helping to push the conversation around what relevant learning looks like that really truly prepares young people for the future. So I'm not here to speak explicitly about big picture learning today, although at some points in our conversation there'll be a little bit of chest pounding because we're really proud of the work that we do, and we all should be. But I'm here to really talk to everyone around project-based learning. And this idea around project-based learning and what it means to the communities that we serve at Big Picture. So we at Big Picture, as we know that you all do it in your schools, always try to begin by celebrating the successes of our students. But we also believe it's equally, in many cases, more important to understand some of their challenges and their contexts. So as Bob kind of hinted to a little bit, I'm on the road a fair amount, and I have a 12-year-old daughter named Isabella at home who's been getting increasingly upset with her daddy's travel schedule. And I had to figure it out, right? Because I can't quit my job. I love what I do, right? So how do I engage my daughter in daddy's life and work when I'm not there? So why don't you help daddy prepare for his presentations when he's giving a talk? So in preparation for today, I was going through my original plan, and I said at the end, Isabella, what do you think? And she was like, She's 12. She's 12, y'all. She's 12. Daddy, are you going to show all those charts? I'm like, I was going to. She's like, why don't you just tell stories? Because you're good at telling stories. Why don't you tell stories? So I want to start off with a true story about a young man named Ramon. True story about a young man named Ramon. Now, Ramon grew up in the housing projects in the Bronx, exactly 5 New York City blocks away from one of the most respected institutions of higher learning in New York City, the Rose Hill campus of Fordham University, which is strategically situated in the Northwest Bronx. So as a little boy, Ramon was first and foremost what every parent would want their young child to be. What is that, y'all? Happy, right? He's happy. He came from a caring family, a loving household. He was intelligent, creative, confident. And as you can tell by this image here, the way he put together that ensemble with the blue turtleneck, striped sweater vest, and a pink, I don't know if you could tell, but it's a pink seersucker jacket. He had an incredible fashion sense at a young age. And this continued to be Ramon as he entered into adolescence. Now, although Ramon, to this day, has not stepped foot on the Fordham University campus, from his parents' bedroom apartment and their high-rise, he had a clear view into the dormitories at Fordham, right? So he often found himself wondering at night, what were the dorm rooms like? Who were the students in this other world that was right beyond my window? How challenging was it? Like, is this a place where I could see myself? And probably the one thing that would be on the mind of any teenage boy when thinking about dorms in schools, are they co-ed? That's right. Are they co-ed? Are the dorm rooms co-ed? So Ramon's high school was roughly a 30-minute walk from his apartment, and every day he had to pass the front entrance to Fordham. At school, he was your typical New York City underachieving student athlete, right? Teachers loved him, they liked him, he was a good kid, had a lot of friends, and he always managed to do, primarily because of the instruction and the delivery of it, the bare minimum, but just enough to ensure that he always remained eligible to engage in athletics year-round. Ramon's life totally changed one fall afternoon on the walk home from school. So at the age of 15, Ramon was assaulted and robbed right outside the front entrance to Fordham University. He was pistol whipped, beat down, and robbed for his $89 Cincinnati Bengals jacket. Wasn't a Warriors jacket, wasn't a 49ers jacket, we're talking about the Bengals. When the ordeal was over, Ramon just ran home, right? He took the long run home to tell his parents. To Ramon's parents' credit, they did exactly what two law-abiding immigrant parents from the Caribbean knew that they could do for their son who had just been robbed at gunpoint. They took him to the local police station to file a report. Two men who Ramon had never met, didn't know, and quite honestly would fit the description of over 2 million men in New York City. They quickly know that he was not getting his jacket back. That very next day, Ramon was on that path back to school. At school, where Ramon spent somewhere close to 12 hours a day because of the number of activities he was engaged in, the most that he got from his teachers was, ouch, what happened? Because he was clearly wearing what had happened the day before. When he explained what happened, they listened and then proceeded to give him some ditto sheets and some worksheets in 10th grade. So there was no one at school where he could necessarily talk to that was going to take it a step further besides, I'm sorry that happened. It really stopped there. Ramon, who was once this happy, confident, and fearless little boy, became a fearful, scared, and angry teenager. Fearful for his life and fearful for his future. Ramon took a turn for the worse. He found some people who were going to make sure that that never happened to him again. People that made him feel safe. He developed an edge. He was no longer that happy, kind of go-lucky boy. And as we often say, the streets had him. He was in the streets. So I want to use Ramon's example to return to this idea of project-based learning. We know there are various ways to approach PBL, right? And I know that a lot of us here would agree that some ways are much more deeper than others. In order to simplify this, I'd just like to capture this as Carlos's 3 ways towards project-based learning, recognizing there's probably a lot more than these. Approach number 1, the generic reframing of core content through projects, right? The prime example that's running rampant right now, on the East Coast especially, in elementary schools, is the teaching of the Oregon Trail. I had to look this up because I didn't learn this, right? I was like, what's the Oregon Trail? So think the Oregon Trail as a method of teaching the history of westward expansion, right? And allowing students to better understand the role of peoples who were part of that immigration, right? So a student, and I know we've got a lot of teachers that are probably like, oh, this is my thing, I do the Oregon Trail. But consider then you have a young person that then assumes the role of someone on this journey, and then something happens on this journey, and then figuring out what do you do next, right? So while marginally interesting to students, they're the same pieces of curriculum that have been taught for years and really don't incorporate students' interest into this. Another prime example of this are math worksheets, the worksheets that we all see in schools. Speaking of worksheets, I'd love to play a quick clip. Anyone familiar with the Wire series, TV series on HBO? Right, Raise It Proud, yeah, that's right, here we go. Okay, so I'd like to show a really brief clip from The Wire. So in this clip, Wallace, who is a teenager living in the projects and is caring for a group of younger children who are corner boys, right? So corner boys are young children who are responsible for selling drugs on the streets. In this particular scene, Wallace, which is played by a young Michael B. Jordan, is trying to contextualize a math problem for one of the students and trying to make it a little bit more relevant for them. I'll play the clip now.
Wallace. Yo, Wallace.
All right, what?
Yo, Wallace.
What?
What's this about here?
This one here? A bus traveling on Central Avenue begins its route by picking up 8 passengers. At the next stop, it picks up 4 more, and then additional 2 at the third stop while discharging 1. At the next to last stop, 3 passengers get off the bus and another 2 get on. How many passengers are still on the bus when the last stop is reached? Just do it in your head.
8.
Damn, Sarah, look. Close your eyes. You work in the ground stash. 20 tall pigs. 2 fiends come up to you and ask for 2 each. Another one cops 3. Then Bodie hands you off 10 more. But some white guy rolls up in the car, waves you down, and pays for 8. How many vials you got left?
15.
How the f*** you able to keep the count right? You're not able to do the book problem here.
Can't be wrong there, f you up.
So while not the most wholesome and positive example, it is indeed a very real one, right? And it vividly drives home a concept, right? Note that the characters reframed a cliched math problem so that it was relevant to the young student and relevant to their lives. So PBL approach number 2 is in-school projects that have direct relevance to students. Why is relevance so important? As mentioned earlier, my daughter Isabella, who is 12, is now in middle school. God help us all. And even though she is in a great public school, there's a trend that we're seeing that as she and other students go through school, they're becoming more and more disengaged. So the annual Gallup student poll of over 100,000 students across the US shows that by the time young people are in 5th grade, only 75% of them are reporting being engaged in school. This is in 5th grade. Seen it firsthand with Isabella. And this downward trend continues through middle school and bottoms out in high school. And what we see there is just a slight uptick, and that's probably because you made it to 12th grade, you see the light at the end of the tunnel, you're like, I'm out of here. So the question is often, how do you create engaged students, right? That's always, when folks visited our schools and visit other deeper learning schools, how are they so engaged? You don't create engaged students, you empower them, right? You afford them the agency to be able to create themselves. You provide them the space, the guidance, and ensure that what they're engaging in is relevant to their work, to their lives. So to state the obvious, no one springs fully formed into the world. We are all a product of our learning experiences. So with that, third approach, which happens to be our personal favorite, is real-world projects that take place in the real world. And we believe the purpose of schools for big-picture learning is to help each learner find their niche and stance in the world, to develop and strengthen each student's potential, and by doing so in a very relevant way, not just within the school walls, but outside of the school walls, and doing so through real-world projects that take place in the real world. Folks always say, all right, that sounds great, but that's really hard to do. So what's your secret sauce, right? Everyone says, what's your secret sauce? Our secret sauce consists of 4 ingredients. Pay attention to the whole child. Let's start there. Let's talk about the student's interests, passions, experiences, challenges, community, family. Knowing all these things gives us a different entry point to working with young people. Second ingredient, let's start with focusing on student strengths, not their weaknesses. Like we immediately go into schools and we want to diagnose where's the gaps? Where do I need to focus on? How about we focus on their strengths? Over time, their challenges, gaps, weaknesses, whatever we prefer to call it, become addressed or become so diminished when compared to their strengths that they become insignificant. All of us here have some really, I'm sure, some deficits or things that we're like, well, I never do this well, but there are other things that you do exceptionally well that makes those things secondary. Third ingredient, allow students to demonstrate what they know in different ways, right? Whether it's presentations of learning, whether it's exhibitions, whether it's student-led conferences, a different way in addition to your more traditional formative and summative assessments where students can demonstrate what they know. And the fourth ingredient, which is kind of the sweetener for us, is encourage leaving to learn. So allowing students to learn outside of the school walls. Our schools are primarily high schools. So for us, allowing students to have internships anywhere from 1 to 2 days a week, and then building the work around some of those experiences, quite honestly, that's the cornerstone for us, is really allowing students to see what they're learning in school and how it's applicable outside of school. And to be able to deliver on that type of individualization, which Bob had referenced earlier, we had to restructure kind of our classes. And for us, it's our advisory. And our advisories are instructional, they're academic, but they're also, they're also a space for social emotional learning and development. So you have a group of students that are led by an advisor, which is what we call our teachers, our content teachers. And that advisor assumes every role from sage on the stage, like now, to guide on the side that really supports students along that journey. We include our parents and family in that mix. We include the mentor, which is the professional at the internship site, who's the expert that works with each student, has their own mentor. And then you have all the other students that are part of a community of learning. And they stay together for 4 years. For us, that's important. It's not a culture, it's not a relationship that can be established in a year. And then to take it even a step further, I know because we're blessed with a lot of practitioners here, how do you do that for each individual student, right? How do you get to that type of personalization for each student? We start off with a learning plan, right, to start off the year. Learning plan meeting. That it's not just the teacher and the student, but it also involves the parents. And that really sets the blueprint for what the learning experiences are going to be for that year, for that student. Then the student is actively engaged in interest-based, hands-on, real-world learning experiences that are taking place outside of school, right? Students are documenting what they're learning, they're developing their portfolios, and then they're engaged in a project that gives back to their internship site. So the projects need to be real. It's a primary question that we always ask of students when they're developing their projects. Exhibitions, presentations of learning. Again, not so much of a show and tell, but more so of a space where students can be proud and defend their work, but also receive really active feedback and have a space for reflection on that work. And then it repeats the cycle. These aren't just abstract diagrams. So it's an image of my advisory and I, several years ago, a long time ago. I'm glad someone got it, thank you. So I was fortunate before being in my current role and various roles I had, this is where it started for me. And I had an opportunity to work with 16 amazing young people who were some of the first students to engage in the big picture learning design. They were students like Odyssey Smith. So a little bit about Odyssey. Odyssey came from a non-traditional household. She was being raised by her grandmother, who she loved dearly. Her parents had some significant challenges in their lives, so they weren't around. Odyssey was that child that that student that when I read her file before school started, I was a little worried, as you perk up, right? Because she had been kicked out of 3 other high schools before coming to our school. Odyssey always had an interest in helping others. And in her 10th grade year, she engaged in a project focused on hypertension because her grandmother, who she loved dearly, was always in and out of the hospital for battling high blood pressure. So her in-depth research was around hypertension, its risk factors, and she wanted to know why African Americans were more susceptible than other groups to this. She had an internship with a third-year Brown University medical student, and with that work, she surveyed, with her mentor, she surveyed over 200 Met students from the school, and in figuring out their body mass index, their BMIs, right? So to also inform the school community on how susceptible our community was around to hypertension, right? And those of you know about BMIs and our math folks in the room, it can be a somewhat complex process as you convert your weight into kilograms and your height into inches and then to meters. She then ran a series of workshops on healthy eating and exercise routines with a nutritionist from a local children's hospital. And then the clincher for her project, Odyssey presented her research in front of medical students and physicians at the National Medical Association Conference in New Orleans with her mentor. This is her 10th grade project, very different from Ramon's experience in 10th grade. Odyssey is now married, a proud mom, a phlebotomist, and completing her studies to become a nurse practitioner. Maybe Arthur, who lost his father at a very young age. And Arthur was involved in some active gang activity in Providence while in high school. Arthur always had an entrepreneurial spirit, not always a legal one, but he had a spirit. During his sophomore year, Arthur interned with a new business incubator in Providence, where he was able to develop and write his own business plan. Then he presented it to local funders for funding and received funding for his proposed business. Today, Arthur, pictured in the middle here, along with his childhood friends, has started a nonprofit organization to help families in New England purchase their homes. Or maybe it's Jessica, who was raised by her mom, who had her at a very young age. Jessica had her son Mikey when she was 15. Jessica explored a number of internships while at the school, but there was one thing consistent about Jessica's experiences. They were all around helping other students. She just wanted to help her community. Whether she was organizing a health and wellness fair for the school community, whether she was developing a unit on helping ninth grade students transition to the med in this kind of non-traditional experience, or whether it was she was developing a kind of curriculum around CSI because there was so many students that were interested in crime scene investigation and forensics. All of her projects focused around helping the school community. Today, Jessica is a college graduate, just recently completed her MSW, and is now serving in a leadership role at a Big Picture Learning School. And what about Ramon? We remember Ramon to start off the story, who grew up in the Bronx, who had his own life challenges and struggles with our education system. Ramon was fortunate and lucky, blessed enough to have an adult, not from his school, not a family member, that saw something in him, right? Noticed a change in him, someone in his neighborhood that just kind of knew better. Took him under his wing, she took him under her wing and supported him throughout, whether it was jobs, whether it was college applications. Someone that was just familiar with kind of what he was going through and was just like, I'm not giving up on this young man. It's a reason why I'm honored to be here with you all today. So it's not only our students that can learn and grow through real-world learning and real-world problem-based learning. You see, problem-based learning isn't just pedagogy. It isn't just curriculum. It isn't just a new form or reform-minded, progressive way to teach. For some students, it really is a lifeline. I have to admit with some difficulty, this is a lesson I wish I had learned at a much younger age. I think it would have made me a better teacher and would have made me a better principal. To state the obvious, the decisions that we make as educators have lasting impacts on our young people, and some of those that are really irreversible. Please meet Andy Luna. Andy Luna is a young man from New York City, whose mother happened to be from the same island that my father was from. I was Andy's principal. Andy was one of those students that pushed my buttons. He pushed barriers, he challenged, And he wanted to see how real we were when we said one student at a time. Andy was the student that I would go to bat for with my colleagues when they were like, I don't know if this is the right place for this young man. I'm like, this is the place for Andy. Until in his junior year, the beginning of his junior year, Andy stole my laptop. Andy refused to return my laptop. And Andy refused to admit that he took my laptop. I gave up on Andy. He could no longer be part of our community. He had to go. Now, here was a kid with tremendous potential, but Andy, like many students that we all know, tested my mettle every day, tested the mettle of my colleagues, the teachers that I'm charged with supporting every day. I felt like I had tried and tried with Andy. So I was presented with many opportunities to know Andy better, and quite honestly, I should have known Andy and his story, right? Because we had very similar experiences. These are the instances, the stories like those Andys that we all know, that will feel totally and completely like the straw that broke the camel's back. These are the true tests for us as educators, as adults, as humans. I failed that test, and I failed Andy.
Eyewitness News now moving to Providence now, where we're learning more about the man shot to death inside an Elmwood Avenue barbershop. Now, we've been working on this story since it first broke yesterday. The victim has been identified as 19-year-old Andy Luna. Police tell us that Luna was indeed targeted. Well, a teenager shot to death at a city barbershop, and it appears to be the latest in a troubling trend across the city. Pinpoint News Tracker takes us to the scene on Elmwood Avenue. That's where Eyewitness News reporter Alex DePrato has more from the Providence Mobile Newsroom.
As you can see here, the barber shop is locked up tight. This marks the third killing at a barber shop in Providence since New Year's Eve. And the woman who works right down here at a tax office believes she saw the shooter run off. Several other people were in the barbershop Wednesday afternoon, including a mother and her 7-year-old son, when the shooter walked in and opened fire. Police say the victim was likely waiting to get his hair cut and was targeted.
Clearly, the assailant knew who he was looking for. He came in, he passed several people to get to the victim.
An employee at the tax office next door peered out this window and says she saw the shooter in a dark hooded sweatshirt and someone else run off.
We saw two people just fly by from the window, just running.
The Blanco murder marks the third killing in a barbershop in Providence since New Year's Eve. And although police don't call the killing random and say it is unrelated to the other barbershop murders, the violence in broad daylight has this community nervous.
We're trying to make a living here and working with the community and everything, and I don't feel safe here.
Used to love playing basketball, met him on a basketball team. He always had a smile, always had a story for everybody. Like, I don't know why somebody would want to kill him.
There is no silver lining, but a clear lesson learned, and one that I and my colleagues at Big Picture Learning will never forget, and a mistake that we'll never repeat. I needed to become a better educator. I needed to be a better teacher. And doing so really in the original definition of the word, which is to lead forth and raise up, which I didn't do for Andy. In the Met and Big Picture Learning at large, for us, we became more thoughtful about our approach to student-centered and project-based learning. It's because of students like Andy that you hear us talk about being unapologetic and relentlessly student-centered. If we're not ready to be woke about the lives of our students and build our approaches, and yes, our projects around these experiences, then what are we even doing? And why are we doing it? I wanted to close with a quote from Dr. Cornel West that I do believe is quite relevant given everyone in this room, right? The leaders, the educators, the folks committed to the right fight, and just kind of the times that we're living in. And the quote reads, "If your success is defined as being well-adjusted to injustice and well-adapted to indifference, then we don't want successful leaders. We want great leaders who love the people enough and respect the people enough to be unbought, unbound, unafraid, and unintimidated to tell the truth." So in the spirit of truth-telling, let's not forget that each of our individual truths and each of our individual narratives aren't the grand narrative for all young people. Please let us continue to lead fearlessly in our work and remember to love hard. Thank you.